I woke up in a box. Dick stared, wide-eyed, and asked with palpable horror, I thought you said that the League of Assassins— Let me talk, or I swear to God you will never see me again. He swallowed and whispered, Okay. I woke up, Dick, in a box. I woke up and I dug my fingers down to the bone in splintering that wooden lid open. I choked on mud and bugs, and I couldn't breathe. I was barely tall enough to reach the surface once I was able to start pushing through the mud. It felt like moving through tar. I slumped at the torso into the grass, and the last thing I remembered that night was the name Sheila Haywood on the headstone next to mine. I don't know if Bruce knows this or not, but Sheila had been working for the Joker. I'd gone to find her because Bruce claimed I was too violent. He had practically disowned me after assuming I'd killed Philippe Garzones, which I hadn't. I'd gone because I wanted proof someone, somewhere, wanted me around. A whimper pushed itself out of Dick's throat, and while he squeezed his eyes shut and white-knuckled the couch so hard his hands shook, he kept his mouth closed. You need to understand, Dick, that I've heard by now what Bruce told you all. He said I rushed in with no plan. He said I went looking for a fight to try and prove myself to him, as if I wanted his approval anymore when he'd already decided that I didn't deserve it. He said that I'd gotten myself killed. I'd gotten myself killed because I was too reckless, like a woman gets herself assaulted for wearing a short skirt, like a guy got himself murdered for going on a run at night, like an addict gets themself addicted. I died because I did something wrong. A child had gotten itself murdered for trusting the last family they might have had left. Dick choked on something in his chest, but stayed quiet. After I dug myself out of my grave, I lost months of time. I don't know if it was the crowbar to the brain box or the oxygen deprivation, but either way, I was on autopilot for weeks. Eventually, someone found me, or, well, found my shell, anyway. From there, it got to Talia, and in what I assume was an attempt to get Bruce's favor, she took me and started trying to fix what was wrong with my head. The lights were on, but nobody was home, and besides some twitches at mentions of Bruce and a lack of response to any attacks from her, she couldn't find anything resembling an awareness. She tried doctors and mages alike, but nothing worked, so she pushed me into her crazy father's malice jacuzzi and hoped for the best. Dick let out a horrified, incredulous little wheeze laugh and hid his face in his hands. It worked, technically, but for the second time I was suffocating on adrenaline and terror, but now, with my memories flooding back in, and all I could hear was that laughter. I felt the phantom sensation of my ribs splintering and the concrete gravel in my palms. My body was reversing and my vision was tinted green, and I was surrounded by strangers who all had weapons trained on me, and I wasn't going to make the mistake of letting anyone get the first strike again. So I gouged a few eyes out, snapped a few necks, and tried to book it. Talia disabled me, pinned me to the ground, and for some reason I couldn't bring myself to bite her. I struggled and twisted, but I couldn't make myself hurt her, and I didn't know why, because I'd barely caught a glance at her before I was horizontal on the cold stone floor. She waited until the initial mindless rage wore off, and then led me to a disgustingly decadent room, where she called in a child who had her skin, her eyes, and her accent, but Bruce's jaw and Bruce's hair. He spoke in a language I didn't understand. Why, I knew, and asked, "Brother?" Apparently, while I'd been brain dead, I'd been the little shit's bodyguard and helped raise him. He saw my eyes, turned to his mother, and said, "Grandfather will not approve." He was right. Raish almost had me killed for stealing his next boost, but when his daughter and grandson both stood in front of me, he backed off. I stuck around for about a year, too anxious to ask about Bruce before I learned about what had happened back home. Now, before you start your fucking lecture, I want you to look at it from my eyes. I did the math. I added some tallies. I'd been pushing daisies for 6 months before something decided I shouldn't be fertilizer anymore, and at about the same time, Bruce had a new kid in the suit and nothing had changed. Not his mannerisms, not his gear, nothing. So when I saw a headline that read, "Batman and Robin return Joker to Arkham," I was a little fucking angry. Now keep in mind that for a significant time period after his centennial anger baths, Raish was unstable and paranoid and more nuts than usual. He was mean and ruthless and crazy, and he'd had centuries to learn how to manage it. I, at 15, had not gotten a handle on my newfound magical rage. I had been beaten half to death with a metal stick by a man my biological mother led me to, and I still tried to shield her from the blast when we found out the door was locked. I found her grave right next to mine, like she had any right. I found that I'd been replaced, and that Joker was still running around exploding children and shit like Bruce didn't care. Again, I went out as a hero. I shielded a woman who'd led me to torture and death. World's greatest detective either couldn't figure out that she'd been a lying sack of shit and didn't care to look into it, or maybe didn't care about me at all. You'd think his obsessive ass would want to know what had happened down to the very last detail, but no. Nothing implied, even given me a mere second thought. Bruce had fucked up, and I wanted him to pay. At the very least, if no one else was going to, I wanted to avenge myself by putting a bullet in between Joker's eyebrows. So yes, I went on a homicidal world tour and learned every conceivable way to kill a man, stopping an international incident and killing traffickers along the way. Dick clenched his jaw and looked up, but still didn't speak. Jason folded his arms and leaned back to stare absently at the ceiling. I was angry, Dick. I still am. I know Tim forced his way in, and I know he only wanted to help, but I'm angry at him, too. There was a chunk of time where I wanted to hit him with beating him into the dirt to prove a point and try to see what made him better than me. On bad days, I think about hitting him with a crowbar myself, and that scares me a little. Primarily, though, I'm just tired. And I want to keep my little brother safe. After me and Spoiler, I won't let him join the Dead Robins Club. Talia showed me what a parent should be, and I have standards as well as self-fucking esteem. I will not settle for Bruce's subpar, ignorant attempts to try and tame or muzzle me. There isn't a cure for this. This is who I am now, and he won't accept that. You won't either, for that matter, which is why I wanted to avoid this. I don't want to see Bruce. I didn't want anybody to see me from before I kicked it until I got a hold of my own crazy. But then, when has the universe ever cared what I wanted? Dick curled in on himself, and a dry smile painted itself across Jason's lips. You can talk now.